If I asked you the question, which expansion of World of Warcraft you enjoyed leveling up the most in, what would be your answer? Maybe you adored the D&D-esque world building and lore that came with leveling in classic World of Warcraft. Or maybe you found yourself entirely immersed in your battle against Sargeras in Legion, while at the same time leveling up your artifact weapon talent point by talent point. Or perhaps, like me, you believe that Wrath of the Lich King has some of the best leveling in World of Warcraft, whether you be a new player or a veteran. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. But why is Wrath of the Lich King so good when it comes to its leveling experience? And why do so many people, myself included, consider it to be one of WoW's best expansions when it comes to progressing to that level cap? Well, today, we're going to answer that question for those who have experienced Wrath already, as well as for those of you guys that have yet to undergo the journey. Wrath of the Lich King, guys, considered by many to be Blizzard's best work when it came to World of Warcraft expansions. Death Knights, Northrend, Arthas, Tuskarr, what's not to love, guys? Ever since the beginning, when this expansion was first announced, people were hyped as hell to get their boots onto the shores of Northrend to confront the Lich King. And unlike World of Warcraft's first expansion, Burning Crusade, Blizzard decided to do something quite different when it came to the introductory experience for Wrath. And that brings us to the first point as to why me and many people love Wrath of the Lich King so much, and that is number one, a feeling of choice. When a player first decides that he wants to go to Northrend, he is not funneled into the same zone as literally everybody else like in the previous expansion. In Burning Crusade, regardless of who you were and what you've done, everybody went through Hellfire Peninsula, which turned the entire zone into a massive cluster of chaos for several days after the expansion's launch. If you played classic TBC at launch, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was wild all those years ago, it was wild recently. Fighting over mobs, the server lagging, crashes, and more. The idea was neat in theory, but I don't think that the technology was up to par, and players, well, they didn't enjoy it as much as maybe Blizzard had hoped. Maybe those PvP players liked it with the world PvP and stuff, but I don't know. This is why Blizzard chose that in Northrend, a player would be given the choice of being able to quest in either the Howling Fjord or the Borean Tundra at the start of the expansion. And this choice that players were given was such a big success for Blizzard, and the idea of being able to choose your level up experience has been repeated multiple times ever since. Not in every expansion, but some expansions like Legion even, where players can choose any zone to start and quest in, and that was really cool. You see, giving players choice creates replayability in a video game. It exposes the players to more storylines, and it makes things, well, not so repetitive. And as for the other zones, well, luckily due to Wrath being sort of like classic OG WoW, things are not so linear. And that leads me to point number two, and that is number two. Things are not always so linear. Guys, you've been on the internet before, just like me, and you'll see these complaints about modern World of Warcraft expansions, and that is that the storytelling is just, it's too linear. A player just doesn't really feel like they're able to go off the beaten path so much to find their own journey. Like, yeah, maybe they could do a quest or two here and there, but they always just get funneled right back to the main storyline. And anybody who's a fan of games like Elder Scrolls or maybe some sandboxy MMOs like Star Wars Galaxies, well, they're gonna have a hard time fitting into this modern game in this respect. But with this expansion, with Wrath of the Lich King, this older version of WoW, although yeah, Wrath does have these overarching zone storylines that do follow some linear quest chains, there are so many side quests and side stories and things to do in Northrend that really anybody can just go off and do their own thing whenever they want. In Northrend, it is still possible to be jumping between 2 or 3 zones at once, finishing different quest lines all at the same time, rather than just burning through the same quest line for hours on end in the same boring zone. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And this keeps questing interesting, for me at least. And I hope as well for others. Even when leveling my current character in Thoriel, I have found myself bouncing between Borean Tundra, Dragonblight, Howling Fjord, and a little bit of Grizzly Hills for a time early on. And that's awesome because although each zone is beautiful, having that variety of choice just makes things so much more interesting. But having choice wouldn't really mean all that much if the choices that you were presented with, the various zones, were just garbage. And that leads me to number 3. the beauty of the frozen Northlands. You know, fellas, Northrend itself, in many ways, is a main character of Wrath of the Lich King, right next to the Lich King himself. The frozen mountains, the pine trees, rolling rivers, the beautiful soundtrack, the whole continent. This northern landmass has some of the most breathtaking vistas and locations that you can find in World of Warcraft. And for me, one of the best things about this expansion is just, well, the scale of it all. Everything is giant in Northrend, from the monsters that we're fighting to the lands that we're traversing. The storm peaks tower over the whole of the continent. Giant cliffs descend deep toward the ocean waters below. Ice-crowned citadel looms always in the distance, hovering over the landmasses. Northrend makes a person, a player, feel small compared to the land that they're questing in. And it's that sense of scale, that sense of beauty, that makes people love questing in Northrend so much, just from a visual and immersive perspective. Because after all, guys, seriously, would you prefer to level through Grizzly Hills over and over, or Tanaris, Storm Peaks, or the Badlands? Now, I know that this is a very subjective point, and I know that there are some people out there that would say, yeah, Tanaris and Badlands, I'd rather be there. But I think for most of us, for many people at least, Northrend just has an effect on people that makes them want to quest through it due to its world, its character, and its scale. But none of that would matter if it didn't have a good story. And that leads me to my final point. Number 4, Northrend tells a story like none other. This, I think, is the big one. People just love Wrath of the Lich King's storytelling. And no, not just through cinematics like the Wrathgate or that buggy as hell Battle for Undercity questline. I'm talking about the storytelling even through regular quests. The mundane collect this, go there, and do these sorts of things. Even these quests, when given a chance, have incredible stories to tell for those of us who can't get enough of that Warcraft lore. And you know, if you think about it, these quests are somewhat of an oddity in World of Warcraft. They're not exactly cinematic and linear like in the modern game's quest lines, but they're also not entirely text-based so that all the plot is found in paragraphs like in, the original classic WoW. No, these are Wrath quests. Quests that still require a bit of reading, a bit of discovery, problem solving, and even repeatedly dying like on that one Drakuru questline I made a video about recently. And we must also not forget that Wrath is also the conclusion to Warcraft 3's storyline, which so many people loved and enjoyed back in the day. For many, it was their entire reason for checking out World of Warcraft, to see what would become of their favorite character, Arthas the Lich King. But where people expected a story just fully centered around Arthas, what they found was something a whole lot more on Northrend. From meeting the Vrykruel, learning about the origins of humanity in Azeroth, befriending the Tuskarr, delving into the mysteries of Ulduar, the Curse of Flesh, encountering Yogg-Saron, meeting the Dragonflights for the first time properly, and a whole lot more. Even the story had an immense scale to it. Wrath just had so much in terms of its storytelling, and people absolutely love it, including myself. And if you are someone ready to delve a little deeper into one of Wrath's best quest lines, in my opinion, check out this video on your screen right now, because this is a quest line in Wrath of the Lich King that you do not want to miss. Thanks for watching, guys.